I believe, let's see, we're up to Dennis. You start first on this question. Okay. The next question we have for you is about economic development. Obviously, economic development is essential to the community's growth. And we're curious about what areas of economic development we should emphasize, and then also your perspective on utilization of economic development incentives to attract and retain business. Yep, and we'll start with you, Dennis.
I spoke to this a little bit earlier regarding economic development, and I remember over the years I've worked in different cities. I hate to go back to the past, but they all hired economic developers. Now, I found out that they weren't necessarily key to bringing in businesses. That what brought the businesses into the communities was the attraction of the community itself, and the business community itself co-opting with the citizens to work and bring businesses in. And there's been a lot of experimentations, and different things tried over the decades to bring businesses in, and some of them were calculated risks in terms of how much you invest and how heavily the government becomes a investor as well, and whether or not you provide certain tax incentives. But we're in competition out there with other cities, and they're doing things, and a lot depends on the type of business you want to attract as well. You want to bring in businesses that don't distract from the quality of life. There are some businesses and industries you quite simply would not want. I mean, if I was chief of police, I would definitely not want, because they could cause a problem with the quality of life in the community. So we want good, clean businesses, things that are attractive to the community, but we want something that's going to keep our people here in Mandan. I like to shop in Mandan as much as I can, and I try to be very loyal. But sometimes you have to go to Bismarck to do your shopping as well. And it's always been this thing: how can we keep our citizens here in Mandan, and how can we provide the businesses here as well? And this is something we need to look at. If we're going to pay sales tax, we should pay our sales tax here in Mandan to support our city and our community. And it's tough. It's tough to compete with Bismarck. They have things over there that make it much more difficult. I remember back in Kansas City, Kansas, with Kansas City, Missouri. Kansas City, Missouri had everything. They had the shopping malls, they had everything. And over a period of years, Kansas City worked really hard, and they took things away from Kansas City, Missouri. So it can be done.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Herauf, when you look at economic development, what areas do you believe Mandan should emphasize? And then what's your perspective on the utilization of economic development incentives to attract and retain business?
Well, again, it goes back to we need to get involved. To shop in Mandan, we need to be involved. We could have our clothing store and shop for shoes. We wouldn't have to rent it as much. And that's one of the developments we need in this town. We used to have that. We used to have Sears. We used to have Pennies. All that is gone. We have to bring something back for the people to stay here and shop. So we have something to look forward to, so that people can stay here. These young people are not going to stay here if we have nothing. And that's not our goal. Our goal is to keep the young people here. And to do that, we're going to have to get some kind of development.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Serhienko, economic development, what should we emphasize in your perspective on incentives?
Well, the development that needs to take place has to be thoughtfully done in recognition of the fact of what Mandan is to Bismarck. By that I mean, yes, it would be really nice to have 3 or 4 box stores, big box stores, Menards, Lowe's, and all these good things. But the reality of it is, those are going to stay in Bismarck because that's where the population is at. So the question is, how can Mandan develop economically and with businesses and things of that nature? And that's where you have to put your eggs in the basket, so to speak. You have to identify what you can support and then go after that. And that's what I think we are trying to do in Mandan. At least the things that I have seen seem to be that way. We are one community. I really don't like identifying Mandan as a bedroom community of Bismarck, because we provide a culture to the unification of the two cities. And Bismarck also provides a certain portion, but I suppose you could say Mandan is the entertainment part of this relationship. And that's probably not fair either, but if we have a good restaurant in Mandan, the people in Bismarck will come over to Mandan, just as the people in Mandan go to Bismarck. It would happen. It's just a matter of making all of these things work out, getting the plans in place, and getting that development done. Did I get all of it? I'm not so sure I answered all your questions.
I think you got the vast majority of it. All right, Ms. Frank, economic development incentives and their role, and your thoughts on where we should emphasize.
Well, I had the opportunity to watch the conversation about retail development that occurred after the City Commission meeting on Tuesday night, and there were some really interesting points that were brought up, and I know Jerry referenced the importance of surveys and polls and paying attention to what the people of Mandan want and what they're willing to support. And there were some really interesting statistics and thoughts that came out of that process. General discount stores, there seems to be a need for that. There's what's called a retail gap, where there's a demand and there's not oversaturation. Restaurants, hardware, home improvement, also sporting good and clothing stores. And I think what's interesting is when you take a look at what the community can support financially, and then you take and look at what the community is saying they want, it really matches. And so I think the direction we need to take is considering, seeking out those types of establishments. The other thing is I think we can't ignore the real estate recommendations from some of the local experts that we go after the development when it comes to industrial and commercial. I think that should be an immediate concern that we should pay attention to in trying to allocate the space for those types of ventures and attracting those types of development. The other thing that I think that we need to pay attention to, and people have a really hard time giving up their money. And I have to agree with them. I mean, I work hard for the money that I get, and I have a hard time giving it to someone through the form of an incentive. And so I think that the incentives that the city has right now are adequate. I think we need to pay attention to how they're being doled out, and we need to make sure that the people that are receiving those incentives are held to a high level of accountability and have some high expectations. I'm having to work hard for that money that we're letting them use. I want to make sure that they're working hard for the money that they receive. And so those are my thoughts on economic development and the use of the funding.
Thank you very much.